anyway, Lige, we had a great meeting the other night. It was after a kind of a long break. We had about 3 weeks, and it was kind of nice to have a little bit of a respite like that through the holidays. Just kind of worked out that way. I think we ought to talk here just a little bit, that, our former city manager, Steve Raper, passed away. His funeral will be this upcoming Saturday. And I believe it's at Lakeside Baptist Church. I'm not sure what time it is, 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock.
I'm not sure on the time, but you're correct on the date.
I'm not either. But, he was a city manager here for an extended period of time. I think he did a great job for us as a community. Right. And I think he's somebody that really we owe a lot to in terms of who we are today and the basis that he's created. He's part of that legacy of Bill Batchelor and Charles Penny and all those folks that had served our city well through the years. And he really even created the who's who of the state. I mean, Ann Wall's done great things in Greenville. We've had a number of people depart to go to Wilson and doing great things. And so I think that's really a testament to the legacy of that management stream and the devotion we put into training people and really building people up in our organization.
Yeah, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. And he was a 16-year tenure here at Rocky Mountain. He was here during Floyd in '99, right. And I think we're known throughout the entire state and country for how we dealt with that. And Steve and Charles Penny, and certainly Peter Varney.
Yeah,
they all had a
had a play. I forget Peter. I mean, gracious, he's been what a tremendous asset to our community.
Right, and so that was a team there for a while, and they did a great job. And it's a big loss to the community. It's a big loss to the state, and I think Rocky Mount's forever grateful to Steve Raper.
Right. Well, and of that team, I mean, all three of them have been city managers, right? I mean, Charles Penny and Peter Varney here most recently. So, twice.
Well, and Steve came in actually as interim as well between Charles and Rochelle Small-Tony.
That's right. I had forgotten that. But anyway, we do owe him a legacy, and we do owe him at least some of our thoughts and praise, and hope everybody's remembering him and his family over the course of the next week or two.
That's right. Most definitely.
So anyway, let's start off maybe with the committee of the whole. That was your meeting, and we went over some stuff that I thought was pretty interesting and exciting. And just in the spirit of disclosure, I want everybody to know a couple of things. One, I've invested at least in some of the underlying real estate here, and did so before I was mayor. I've disclosed that to council. I've disclosed that to anybody and everybody who looks at it. My percentage of ownership of this is far less than 10% and would not really require disclosure in most SEC types of forms. However, but just being in the city of Rocky Mount, I think it's important that folks understand that that's the deal.
Well, and also you're exhibiting what we talk about with transparency, and I think that's extremely important. And so, Mayor, I appreciate you doing that. But certainly that was Monday night, the 8th. We had a presentation by the group, Benton Moss, who's local here. He Benton within himself is a great asset to the community, but he's heading up a group that's going to develop on Washington Street, which is over in Edgecombe County, and then Southeast Main Street. And we had a presentation from that group, and part of that group, I can't remember the name of it, but part of that group.
It's the old Riverside, NSV, I think, is what they call themselves now. I'm not sure what that's. New South Ventures.
New South Ventures. But they've developed, background is in Durham, I think, and they've done stuff in Wilt. They're doing stuff currently in Wilson. There's a lot going on with Wilson with some parking garages and some the ball field, I think, and then some apartments.
New apartments, that's right. Centro, I think, development that they're doing not far from the new ballpark. And
so they have a track record, and now they want to bring that to Rocky Mount, which is awesome. And I think in
fact, they did some work in Fayetteville. You remember the old Haymont Hotel downtown? If anybody spent any time down in the former Fort Bragg, current Fort Liberty, that was somewhat of a hot spot for all kinds of interesting behaviors, but they've converted that into condominiums and have done a nice project with it, and then that's part of the legacy of this particular group too.
Right. So I'm trying to go through the whole process, and you probably know it better than I do, but the two projects are on 201 South Washington and then 204 to 232 South West Main, and it's the old Orange Crush building on Washington Street.
Right.
And I think looking at 16 apartment units, 1 bedroom and 12 of them, and 4 of them are 2 bedrooms, and then 8,700 square feet of retail downstairs, which is mixed use is what we need.
Right.
We need to attract folks to live and play downtown. So that's certainly, I think, in what we're looking for. In the total dollars on that is $8 million rehab. And what and really, well, we get to the one on Main Street, which is 20 apartments, 12 one bedroom, 8 2 beds, and then 17,500 square feet of ground floor retail space, which can be anything from medical to retail to restaurants. So very flexible with everything that they do. So that could potentially bring a lot of folks downtown. So you're looking at about almost $17 million worth of investment. So back before, we were just mentioning Peter Varney, and I actually went through before I came here, and we actually received an email from the city manager today. So in December 23rd of 22, Peter Varney presented to the city council a new downtown investment incentive program, which is up to $500,000. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to note on that the minimum investment on that is $1 million. It can't be any more. It can't comprise any more than 20% of the total deal, which I think is important because if you're going to invest in anything, the public doesn't need to be the primary money behind it, and it has to be more than 5,000 square feet. So it meets all that kind of criteria. And then important to yours truly is accountability.
That's right. Sure. Well, no, I think that's incredibly important.
And so the downtown development manager would be the one that goes through the approval process, but then the finance folks have to also sign off on it. And then in addition to that, you can go to the, I think the internal auditor to look at some of that. But extremely happy with how Peter came up with the grant, and then we went through and approved that grant process back in. I don't have the minutes in front of me, but we approved that grant process.
So I'd like to go back and just talk a little bit about the capital structure and the stack, as they call it, the cap stack, and really why we need to be doing public-private partnerships in the nature of this. So in this particular project, as I indicated, disclosed, I've been part of it for now going on 5 years. Before I was mayor, and I was a group of investors who pooled their money to buy some downtown assets, primarily to make sure they weren't just decaying in place, right? And so that group bought it, basically stabilized the structures, which really means make sure the windows weren't broken out, make sure the roofs weren't leaking, make sure there was no rot, stopping those kinds of processes. So it was a minimum spend on that.
Right.
And so, so then the idea was either there's an exit when you find a developer who wants to buy it and develop it, or you become part of the development. And typically how that works is you find a developer and you say, hey, look, we'll contribute the underlying asset. We'll contribute the land. And the developer comes back and he says, okay, well, I'm going to go out and get the loans from the bank. I'm taking the risk. Your capital contribution to this project is the land. And what I'm going to make on the deal is whatever value I can create by virtue of this money that I'm borrowing, in part leveraging the land and the asset there, and part on my own personal credit. But I've still got to get it up to marketability to make any cash flow, right? So when you look at this math and you look at what senior lenders will give you, or traditional banks, they'll give you an 80% loan to value. And you look in this particular deal and any deal similar to this, and what you find is the underlying asset has not appreciated enough, or there are not enough comparables out there that any senior lender is willing to loan money. So either somebody's got to write a check, and very few people have the kind of capital it requires to do that. And if they do, few people are willing to take that 100% risk associated with that. And so then what they do is they go back, and what you'll find in this deal is that there's a little small gap between marketability. In this case, there's zero value in retail space. The banks are assigning zero value to it just because, Amazon, there's been a lot of change in our world and how that works. Anyway, long story short, there's a gap. That gap in this particular project works out to be about 6 or 7% of the total value. And in order to get this project off the ground, the city has to say, okay, well, yes, we're going to commit to giving you the money. But that commitment then frees up all these other loans that are able to do it. They're not taking any money in the end until the end. And there's still risk associated with whether or not the thing even cash flows. and there's still an obligation to the bank. So it's not this panacea of, oh, let me give you all this money and you're going to make tons of money. It's if we want downtown developed, we're going to have to take these risks with other people, which is why Peter came up with that criteria.
Right.
And I expect there'll be other projects, and I expect that we want to encourage all those projects that we possibly can in our downtown area, and frankly, in other places in the city where it makes sense.
Right. No, I completely agree. And again, public dollars in there, provided it gives the return on investment that the public's going to place in there, which includes the property taxes generated off of that, and then the sales tax, and then also hopefully reduction in crime and an increase in bringing people to Rocky Mount. So I think it's a win-win. And then the other piece, which is, I've been hounding on it for a long, is that accountability piece.
That's right.
And that's extremely important. So,
and in this case, you point, it's an exchange of $1 million in exchange for $17 million worth of value being created, which creates ad valorem, should create sales tax, should create utility spends. And so when you start looking at the return of that capital from the city's perspective, you can measure that in actually a fairly short period of time.
Correct.
So, I mean, I think it's important that people understand the economics of it, why it makes sense to do these things, because I got to tell you, in my past, I read these headlines and I'm like, oh my gosh, that makes no sense to me why we're doing that. The city doesn't belong there. State doesn't belong there. The federal doesn't belong there. But the truth is, if you're wanting to help close that gap and you're willing to get private industry and private individuals to take some risk, then you got to seed it a little bit. And again, I think this is something that we ought to consider doing where it makes sense, where the criterion is consistent, where it's open to everybody and it makes sense.
Consistency and open to everyone.
All that makes sense.
So, bottom line is we've got some exciting things happening in Rocky Mount. And finally, all the investments that Rocky Mount has placed in before you and I became involved in the government, whether it be Streetscape, Douglas Block, including the event center, the train station, and that's been over a 20, 25-year period. All that's come to fruition, hopefully, in this. And we've had other people invest. I mean, you have the Davis Loss just recently within the past year or so.
That's right. Davis Loss, we've had, Nazir Dukes do a couple properties in the Gray Street area. They're full. We're seeing where restaurants move downtown. We're seeing things happen.
Right.
It's sort of like the 15-year overnight success. I mean, I think at some point it'll start looking like a hockey stick. But then there's been a long period of investment, to your point, Streetscape, all those things that previous councils have done that are making an impact here.
Sure. So we're I think more than likely on the next meeting, the city council will decide on this, whether we vote in favor or not.
Hopefully there'll be a public hearing, and although I've heard that may actually be delayed because of some notice issues as recently as 15 minutes ago. So, So we'll see that hopefully we'll be able to have this in the next meeting and it doesn't get pushed out to February. But regardless, it's coming. I think it's good, and I think it's a good thing for us to consider. I mean, just like the investment of the property out on 6495, I'm getting nothing but praise on that. I mean, a lot of people are just saying that's just great. Thank you guys for doing it. That's visionary. A few folks criticizing that, but not really a lot in my experience. Now, you may be getting a different, type of conversation.
My interaction's been, pretty similar to yours. I think I can recall one person directly saying they had some concerns with it. And it's really where philosophically some people just completely think the government shouldn't get involved on the investment piece. And I get it to a certain extent. But the way I like to explain
I get it 100%. Yeah. I do. But I think you're going to talk about the exception and why this is unique.
Well, this is unique in the sheer fact that Rocky Mount cannot grow from land mass because we can't go through involuntary annexation, regardless whether you agree with it or not. The fact is you can't do that. We have land adjacent to Rocky Mount that we can, and we also have an exit, the first exit that we're going to have directly off I-95 into the city of Rocky Mount. And it's, this is a one-time in a lifetime that we can do this and have this opportunity for all of Rocky Mount to benefit. And so I think the vision that we have is we have that property for economic development. And yes, it's going to take some money, but the one thing that it's going to take with investment of money, regardless of what goes there, the turnaround on that's pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And even if let's just say we can't attract something there, we could go through and sell that land, and not that we want to do that, but sell the land to make and it's not the reason to make money off that land. But
Sure it is.
Well, the point I'm making is
I know.
that's not the total intent.
Right.
The intent is for it to be
We're
developed.
not speculating.
Not speculating. The total intent is economic investment. And even as of yesterday, and I think I gave the person your number. I know Alan Matthews.
Mm-hmm.
They're interested in their property.
Mm-hmm.
Being promoted for that's adjacent or near that. That's not part of it. So, it's already doing what it needs to do. Now, we've exercised the options, which we had, by the end of the year, 12/31 of 23.
To give notice. To exercise them by 3/31.
And I think we have 90 days to complete. So we're still in that process. So it sounds like maybe into March we have to have the money in place. So it's technically not ours yet.
No. Well, the other thing I think that, we need to point out as well is that not only all the things you've said, but that land is divided up into, I can't remember exactly, they call it 13, 14 different plats.
Right.
And to be able to consolidate the entirety of that 300 acres ever again is a very low probability. And so that was the other key component to trying to exercise those options.
Correct.
I mean, if we could have renewed them, that would have been probably a better approach.
Yeah.
Probably would have inured better to the benefit of the landowners, but at some point you get impatient, and I get it. Now, with that said, I've talked with folks at the Gateways Partnership and Alan Matthews who've taken a lead kind of, or receiving a lot of phone calls, and they've already expressed to me a tremendous amount of interest already on that land. So I don't feel like it's a risk proposition.
Right.
I think the question is, are we going to be able to do the highest and best use and the best project for the city of Rocky Mount? Because it will impact what we look like for the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Correct. And that's important.
It is.
Anyway, good things going. And so we ended the committee of the whole a little early because we had to go and get some pictures taken with some ball teams, some exciting stuff. 2 football teams. Yeah,
that's exciting. Our Rocky Mount Academy won the state championship and the 8-man football. I mean, I'm tickled to death with that. That's like the 4th one in 10 years or something like that. Yeah. So it's pretty impressive. And then Rocky Mount Middle School also won a championship. We're able to celebrate those guys. And so, I mean, it's always awesome to have those guys in Chambers. Yeah, it's fun to have them and their family, and to really celebrate some positive things going on in the community. A lot of time, a lot of things we hear and people come up and speak. It's not always fun, but it's fun and to have the young folks come in there. And gave out 2 ribbons of valor to our 2 police officers. And I tell you what, being wounded and engaged in a shootout, and it just really highlights and accentuates the risk that those folks, those men and women, take on our benefit as residents in Rocky Mount. And I'm truly appreciative of it, and just stand in awe and so grateful for them and their willingness to serve in that capacity. Right. And in addition, I think Chief Hassel did a great job of also acknowledging the families, because it takes a lot from the families. And just to mention the names, it's Sergeant Cameron Joyner and Corporal Vicky Hussey. And just to listen to the story, I'm thankful we have people that are brave enough and that can go out there to protect to protect me, protect you, protect the citizens of Rocky Mount. And so I'm, appreciative to not only them, but the entire police department and all the others, including, even the fire and the other EMT that folks have to go in there, because a lot of times they go into situations that are not. We have a first responder system, so everybody's out there, right? Yeah. So that matters, and to be able to back up, folks who are wounded in the line of duty, it's significant, right? So anyway, I think in the regular meeting we had, we got through public comments. We'll say it that way. I mean, it was kind of the usual list of suspects, and with many of the same and similar topics to what we hear on every other weekly basis. Then we moved into the consent agenda. There was a little bit of conversation about that, really, as it related to a particular grant for Edgemont, as it looks at a water study. It drew a little bit of conversation from Councilman Blackwell, asking questions really about, what that study was going to do. And I think what we learned, and I think it's pretty exciting, is that we were receiving money. We'll engage in a study. There's been some flooding in that particular neighborhood for some period of time. The process will take over a 12-month period of time up to, and hopefully we'll be able to clear out some of the flooding and some of the water issues that have been in that particular part of the city.
Right.
So I think that's encouraging, and I think that's good. And it's just good to see that the city is on top of these things and continue to work toward success for everybody.
Right. And I think it's also earlier part of the consent agenda was the approval of the award and the duty badge and sidearm to
That's
Lieutenant Michael Whitley of 30 years of service and Sergeant Motley for 29 and a half years. So,
Thank you for reminding me of that. You're right. Well, that's a big deal. I mean, look,
Yeah.
you do 30 years of anything.
Right.
I don't know that I've done much of anything in my life for 30 years, except be.
Well, but anyway, I think it's worth noting because, going back, that's a profession that
we need and we need to attract.
Right.
And, and I'm so grateful that we have folks. I
Right.
mean, that thin blue line is thin and it's important and it's critical for our success and for our public safety. And, as I run polls and as I tell everybody all the time, I mean, consistently, that's been the issue. Number one,
Right.
public safety, public safety, public safety. Now, I'm happy to say that's charting downward, but
Right.
it's still the number one issue for everybody,
Right.
top of mind. And I think that's true all over the country. I don't
Sure.
think that's a Rocky Mount thing.
No, it's not unique to Rocky Mountain. And the last thing on the consent agenda was, believe it or not, we put almost $610,000 in tubular poles, which are for utilities. So it's amazing what you have to spend.
Nobody really appreciates infrastructure, right? We talk about it and just when this big blur, but it's expensive to pave roads.
Right.
It's expensive to put up poles. It's expensive to do these
Right.
things. And we just drive by. We don't think about it. I mean, we hit a pothole. We sure do think about it. We talk about it.
Right.
But other than that,
But Tuesday, we had the big storm, the wind event that
Yeah.
came through. I'm sure everyone thought about it when the lights flickered and so forth.
yeah.
That's when you really appreciate it, when you're going through a storm and
Let's talk about that for a minute. The city of Rocky Mount really doesn't have many power outages for extended periods of time.
Let's knock on some wood.
Well, I know. Well, I'm just going to have to say this just because I'm the mayor and the mayor ProTem. But, the mill today was without power for most of the day because it was knocked out during that wind outage.
Oh, wow.
But and they're on Duke Power. But, if they were to move over to the real utility of the area with a better rating, then I think they would be better served. And that's my shameless plug for the city of Rocky Mount, our utilities. But
It's a fact. We do have better rates.
That's exactly right. We do have better rates and we have better service. But I think that's the point. We often overlook those things that are so important to
Right.
us, and those folks are out there working on the line, working in these different departments within the city, and it's a big deal. And they do a great job, and we don't often talk about it. And I think that's a
Right.
shame.
Yeah. Well, you're right. Utilities, both electric and gas.
That's right.
And then you got your water and sewer folks.
That's right. That's right.
All vitally important to daily life.
Absolutely, it is, and we don't think about it much because it works. It's like your finger. You cut it, all of a sudden you think about it a lot. Otherwise, it's just kind of there.
Right. So we involved in a great group of people at the City of Rocky Mount from everything we've talked about, and then I guess we kind of ended the meeting going into public hearings.
We did. We did. We had two public hearings that we held. One was related to a rezoning on Wesleyan Boulevard. There's a racetrack that we'd like to develop there. There's been a little bit of controversy and discussion about how safe that particular intersection is.
Right.
There has been a history of a number of wrecks there, and
Right.
DOT has acknowledged that. And but the question before us really was, do we rezone? Not
Right.
speaking to how it needs to be laid out, not talking about the impact of safety in that particular location. And that's something that the DOT will reckon with. In fact, I've seen some early correspondence that suggests they're dealing with that as we speak. So I don't know what that looks like ultimately,
Right.
but it's certainly we want to encourage business
Right.
on our major corridors, and 301 certainly qualifies in that category. And it impacts us in terms of the sales tax we're able to pick up. It certainly impacts us in terms of services we're able to provide, and the list goes on. So
Right.
I thought it was the right decision. I thought it was right to delay that to allow the adjacent property owner to have some conversation to see if they could work something out. So I felt like that was handled as it should be handled.
Right.
And I'm sure it caused a little bit of delay. And on the development side, I'm sure it didn't create a whole lot of happiness. But you know what? I think everybody's in a better place now.
Right. And I agree with everything you said. And again, safety is paramount. But really, my focus as a city council person was really on the rezoning piece. And
That's right.
And it was consistent with what is there now. Yeah. And to your point, I think DOT, and they have an obligation to make sure things are safe.
That's right.
And they have acknowledged that they've got history there. So to your point, I think they're going to have to reconfigure or redo how things might be. That's there. Right. So, I think again that was a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we rezoned a spot on Green Pastures Road. I don't think that drew any kind of commentary from anybody, and it passed without any kind of question.
Right.
There was one that was tabled related to a storage facility out on Leggett Road, I believe, in Old 64. Is that the intersection?
Springfield.
Well, okay, Leggett and Springfield become the same road, right?
I just know because that's old family area back there on Springfield Road.
Sure. And I'm not sure exactly where the line is, but it's the same road. All right. So, but anyway, so that was delayed, and I think that was, I think that's appropriate. I don't think that's going to be a real issue going forward. No. And there were two other things that were delayed. One was a development project in the same general area that we're talking about, the land that we acquired or are acquiring, and then also a place not far from the hospital. So just to allow a few more I's to be dotted and a few T's to be crossed. And so I think that'll all end up in the place that it needs to end up when it's all said and done.
Right. So, yeah, it was a meeting that, I think with a lot of the public comment, it lasted till about 9. We didn't get out of there till about 9:15 because we followed it up with a closed session.
Yeah, I just think it's something that we can sum this up in 15 minutes or less, and it took us an hour and a half to 2 hours to live through just based on the commentary and discussion. But that's appropriate. That's what we're there for. Right. That is the process and the way it needs to be.
Right. So, 2024 has gotten off to a pretty good start, I believe, and I look forward to a good year.
Absolutely. Well, look, thank you for coming, and I appreciate all that you do for the city.
Likewise. Thank you, Mayor.